Hello and welcome back to Bluebaggers Edge, and we come to you off the back of another disappointing performance by the team, this time against Sydney, coming out of round 10. And off the back of a win, you're kind of like, have things changed? And especially so when you strung a few wins together. We'd won, 4 of our past 5, I think it was, and you kind of give yourself a little bit of context because, 2 of those wins were against minnow teams in West Coast and North. And you could probably lump St Kilda in with that as well, albeit, we have failed to match up on that side in particular in recent times. So heading into the game against Sydney, you probably would have seen it in my preview, but I was bullish and I was quoted as saying that it's going to be a close game, and I expected us to, I guess, I was hopeful, I think, of us putting up a decent performance. But the realist in me was like, you know what? We don't perform too well at the SCG for whatever reason, and psychologically that would play on the minds of the players, and it wouldn't surprise me if we came away with a loss. But you just hoped it wouldn't be that way. And as we know, as we saw, it was. And I've referred to the Carlton team as being a Jekyll and Hyde for a number of weeks now. And this is another, I guess, instance of it where it's the good and the ugly, or the impressive and the ugly, because the difference between our good and bad is they're just poles apart. And we can see it in the same game. It was a game that was highly frustrating, and, issues that we've seen in the past when pressure's applied and we go to water. So let's just have a look at the raw stats first and foremost. So the final score was 11-12-78 Sydney to Carlton 9-8-62. And before we get into, I guess, team stats, I just want to draw your attention to 2 guys here that absolutely tore us to shreds. And you might see these guys on paper, their names, Isaac Heaney and Chad Warner. And you're probably thinking, wait a second, they ring a bell, because I could have sworn last time we played them in round 10 in 2024, they actually tore us to shreds then as well. And would you believe it's happened again? It's happened again. Now, I want to draw your attention to what Voss said in the press conference. And I just laughed. I really laughed, because he said, the roles that we had, we strayed from. Heaney and Warner, we put a heap of effort into in our planning, and we couldn't get it done in the second half, and they got off the chain. The stats are there to tell the impact that they had. And that there is just so perplexing, because, again, as he's referred to there, you look at the stats, you look at the impact that they had, and you're like, where was the planning? Who were we using to try and negate these 2 players? I mean, if one gets off the chain of the 2, you could probably excuse it. But for both of these guys, again, the prime culprits last time to do the exact same damage that they did last time was craziness. And I just want to draw your attention to that previous occasion when we played Sydney. So look at the stats here on the weekend from both Heaney and Warner. Heaney, 38 disposals, 2 goals, 7 scoring shots, which is just ludicrous. And Chad Warner, 30 disposals and 2 goals. Now let's have a look how it compares to our previous encounter with Sydney and what the damage they did to us then. Let's have a look. Chad Warner, 28 disposals, 3 goals, 2. Isaac Heaney, 24 disposals, 3 goals, 1. So again, they matched each other for the number of goals that they kicked, which is quite funny, numerology in that. But what were we doing? What was the plan? I want to know the plan, because I imagine it would have been team defense. But I can't recall at stoppages, any player putting body on these players, putting time and effort into tagging them when they were actually getting off the chain in the second half. Deploy a run with on one of these guys. And Heaney was that man who was tearing us to shreds with ease. 9 clearances as well to go with it. Chad Warner, 630 metres gained, the most for the match. And yet we didn't pull any levers in game. We're just like, no, hands off the wheel. We trained for this. We planned for this. So let's just leave things as are. If it was team defense, which I imagine it probably was. But if that was the case, if things are not working, you make changes. You deploy a run with on Heaney. You shut him down. You prevent the amount of impact he's having on the game. 3 goals, 2 goals, 5, honestly. It's shit. That's what it is. Plain and simple. It is shit. Let's have a look at the team stats and become ever more frustrated. Disposals, no surprise there, Sydney, in their favour by 13. They were above their season average. We were below. Inside 50s, 53 to 54. We were quite even, both teams, in line, very similar to their season average. Disposal efficiency, again, very, very similar. Both sides were down on efficiency, which is no surprise because it was a shit of a game to watch when we're talking about, execution skills, cleanness with the footy. It just was non-existent. But we were worse. We were worse. Efficiency, inside 50, a big, big issue that's reared its head yet again. Laughable season average, 43.4. But we were actually below that. We just had to outdo ourselves with the shitness, 40.7. Sydney were above their season average. They had 50.9. 10% more, 10.2% more to be exact, efficiency inside 50. Free kicks even. Mind you, free kicks, I will say, they were very, 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 very questionable. For both sides, I will say, but there were particular, as we know, that moment when the ball came off McGovern's boot and clearly hit the turf and then went out. The boundary umpire didn't have a definitive, view of whether or not the ball went out on the full. But he guessed. If he questioned it and said, I'm not sure, the field umpire could have overruled him and said, okay, no worries, we'll call it a throw-in. But no. Just one of a few umpire errors in the night, just to put on top of the errors that the Carlton players had. So really was the sugar on top of that. Stoppages. Look at this. Now, it was always going to be the case. I spoke about it in the preview that Grundy was going to absolutely smash Pitnet. And early on, Pitnet looked like he was kind of holding sway a little bit. The midfield was actually operating not too badly. But as the game drew on, Grundy just got on top. Well above their season average. And we were well below ours. And just, again, speaks to the impact of, and the loss of TDK. Clearances, 36 to 45. We were below our season average. Sydney were 9, nearly 9 above theirs. Centre clearances, again. Stoppage clearances, again. We were bested. Possession-wise, we were down 11. Uncontested possessions, quite even across the board. So I guess that's a positive. But, it was a highly congested game for most of it throughout. Turnovers, surprisingly, we had 2 less than Sydney. Marks, I don't believe this. We had 16 more marks. But, it didn't translate into anything impactful, goals, scoring opportunities, all that sort of stuff. However, well down on our season average. Well down. Mind you, Sydney were as well. But it was a game that was just turned into a scrap, much like the game against Killer. Marks inside 50, another interesting one. We had 10 apparently, 4 more than Sydney, which I don't believe. Contested marks, we had 2 more. And scoring-wise, as we know, look at that. 23 scoring shots, which were converted to either goals or behinds. And we had 17. We were below our season average, which in itself isn't the best. And Sydney were kind of on par. But this is like the most frustrating again, like being in front for a majority of the game and just not being able to hold sway. And when the pressure was dialed up by Sydney, our lack of confidence, conversely, was dialed down. and we went to water, as is the case. It's happened countless times. Richmond, Collingwood, Adelaide, especially those games. And we've been worked out. We've been worked out. And I know it's on the players because they're on the field. They obviously dictate the game in itself. But the coaches do not go without fault. And I've seen it in the media for one of the rare times now that they're kind of putting the blowtorch and the spotlight on Voss and the assistant coaches. But as I said, you just look at the lack of accountability that we had for, Heaney and Warner, and the disrespect, I guess, that we showed them because we were like, we'll just let them do what they do and tear us to shreds. And both of those players are really, really strong players in terms of pushing forward and kicking goals and having scoreboard impact. And you don't really need to do, I guess, homework or study that, Voss is alluding to. You just watch them play and you see how impactful both of those guys are. Defense. This was one of the rare positives. And I don't quite believe it. 71. Is that some sort of error to 67? So 4 more in our favour. And tackles inside 50. I don't believe it. It's just so frustrating. And it's literally Jekyll and Hyde within the same game. Let's have a look at some of the stats. And pinpoint a couple of guys that I've spoken about ad nauseum, and I've spoken about them time and again about the same issues, and I'm at the point now where I'm kind of similar to where I was last season. You would have heard me speak about Orazio Fantasia and how he was being gifted games off the back of not playing, I guess an impactful enough role and not contributing to the team as a whole. And there's a couple of guys as well that are doing that, but there is one that I want to pinpoint, and I hate doing it because you don't want to be that sort of supporter that, is always pinpointing the same player, especially when they're scapegoats, because there are, players that are unfairly, criticised, and we saw it early start of the season with Nick Haynes, who's come good, and he's responded to criticism. But there's a guy here that I just want to point out because he's not performing a role of a player of what's required of him week in, week out. It's this man right here. It's Jesse Motlop, which is no surprise. I've spoken about him in the past, and, in modern footy, as a small forward especially, you can't get by just kicking goals. I mean, if you are kicking goals, that's good enough, but there's extra layers to it. And it comes in the form of pressure acts, tackles, and having, I guess, development in your game at a point where you're not making the same rookie errors and mistakes as what you'd expect of a first-year player. And I just want to highlight that first off because there are so many moments where his decision-making is very, very questionable. With the attributes he has, with his speed, with his nimbleness, I guess you'll call it, he's getting caught. When he was one out in the forward 50, when he had the footy, he was easily caught, shut down, holding the ball, turned the ball over, and, results in scoring shots and everything else. So, Jesse, the first layer is with regards to the lack of, I guess, tackling pressure. However, I will say that, compared to previous seasons, that has pretty much been non-existent. And I'll give him credit for at least there have been games there where he has dialed that up. I think it was against North Melbourne. He was really good. Hawthorn, he wasn't too bad either. But, it's that inconsistency, which is an issue. But again, credit to him. He has, started to develop that side of his game. However, there are basics that he's not executing. Disposal efficiency, 28.6. Turnovers galore, not hitting targets. And above all else, let's have a look at his career to date, because there is one thing that is not up to scratch. And it's the main reason why you're in the team as a small forward. And it comes down to scores and goals kicked. In 10 games, he's kicked 6 goals, which, you might be like, okay, well, that's not too bad. That's not too bad. That's over 50%. Let's have a little look, because he is actually, when you sort of narrow, things a little bit closer and you look at the stats for each match, you soon realize, hold up a second, it doesn't quite add up. So he's played 10 games in total. Without looking at the stats, I would have loved for you to, I probably should have asked this before I went to this screen, but how many games do you reckon he's kicked a goal in? He's kicked 6 goals out of 10 games. It's an interesting question, because when we have a look, he has not scored a goal in round 1, 2, round 4, 3, round 5, 4, round 7, 5, round 9, and 6, round 10. There are 6 games he has not scored a goal. 6 games out of 10. And one of those games where he scored a goal has been 3. That's accounted for half of the goals that he scored in one game. And that was a really good game, granted. That was a very nice game against North Melbourne, albeit against North Melbourne. When you put that aside, it looks pretty dire. It looks very dire. Single goals in 1, 2, 3 games. 6 games, he has not scored a goal. If you are not scoring goals as a small forward, how are you in the team? I know, as I said, the other layer to being a small forward is you have to provide pressure acts, tackling. But again, has that been consistent across the course of the season? No, it hasn't. So I pose the question, why is it he is still in the senior team and hasn't been given time to find form and develop his game at VFL level? I don't know why. Like we've dropped Cooper Lord at one stage as well, which I think is very laughable off the back of as well. Congratulations to good old Coops, because he is the round 10 rising star. But he's been a perennial sub and he's been able to perform when he's come onto the field. Jesse Motlop has been given full games, and we can see it here, the raw stats. Somehow, he's sticking around the team. We'll give him that. Again, pressure acts. There have been games there where his pressure acts have been pretty good. That game there in round 6, 9 tackles. Perfect. His last 2 games, not too bad. On the weekend, he had 4 tackles, 5 the week before, which is good. Not too bad. But you've got to do more than that. I'm sorry. We've got too many of these players playing this exact same role as a pressure forward. We've got Fogarty. We've got, of course, the man, Frankie Evans. We've got, Will White, which is kind of, he's a youngster. You can give him a little bit of leeway. He's played a handful of games now and first-year player. But if I see at team selection heading into round 11, Will White being dropped and Jesse Motlop keeping his spot, I will be very pissed off. Very pissed off. I'm sorry. How many seasons have you played now, Jesse? This is your 4th season. And you're kicking 6 goals in 10 games. And 6 of those games, you're not scoring. You're not kicking goals. And if you want to take it another level as well, there's actually 3 games where he actually hasn't impacted the scoreboard at all. One of which was on the weekend. Again, I hate picking on players, but when I see the same thing, the same issues, time and time again, we need guys to go back to the VFL. And I don't care who you are. We've seen it with Doherty, and that's warranted. From senior players to 4th-year players, come on. If you're not at the standard of senior footy, if you're not kicking goals as a small forward, what are you doing in the senior team? We've got a surplus of small forwards now where there's enough competition for us not to play as many small forwards as we are. I don't want to harp on about poor Jesse because I don't feel like I want to be picking on him. But he's one of the few players that, one of many, I should say, that are just not performing. Another player that's not performing that I was alluding to, Mitch McGovern. Mitch McGovern. And when we talk about players, how long has he been in the system now? He's been playing since 2016. The basic errors. His kicking has to be among the worst of our senior players. Absolutely terrible. And, speaking about Motlop going back to the VFL, finding form, the same applies to Mitch. I'm sorry, go back to the VFL. And yet the annoying thing is now that, unfortunately, I think Sauce is going to be out with the groin injury, and it means now that Gov is going to have a solid spot in the team. And that speaks more to our lack of depth as well, because we don't have players on the surplus that, on the fringes that can come in and, really make Gov accountable for not playing his role. We've obviously got, Young, who's been admirable. He's been playing at both ends. But with Sauce out, we've already got Carroll coming in, a youngster. Only played a handful of games, but just turnovers from Gov as well. They were resulting in goals, resulting in scoring opportunities, and they're not just basic turnovers. That just, turns the footy over to the opposition team, and it's a nothing sort of turnover. It's a turnover that is resulting in scoring opportunities. Bites off more than he can chew, tries to execute the kicks that, it's not within his skill set to do. Sauce, 100%, I could back him in. He's one of the better kicks in our defense. But Gov, putrid. Absolutely putrid. And so for Gov, it's just not good enough, really. For a player of his caliber, having been in the system for as long as he has, just basic errors. And it's not good enough at all. I don't want to harp back over Jesse, but I do have a tab here I forgot to go through, just comparing Dirds to Jesse Motlop. So, as I said, Jesse scored 6 goals in 10 games. You compare that to Corey Durden, who I'm a big fan of, and love his tackling, love everything else, and he's in the right positions. He plays as a really, I think, nice role as a traditional small forward, being able to provide that attacking nous. I think that that Jesse does lack. So Dirds, he's kicked over 6 games, the total of 10 goals. So it's virtually the opposite. So Jesse scored 6 goals in 10 games. Dirds has scored 10 goals in 6 games. And let's have a look. Of course, there were 6 games there where Jesse hasn't kicked a goal. Compare that to Corey, good old Dirds, and he has kicked. He's kicked 4 goals, 2 goals, 1 goal, 2 goals, no goals in round 9, and then 1 goal on the weekend. So of those 6 games he's played, he's kicked goals in 5 of them, and multiple goal scorers in 1, 2, 3 of those. And the one that he missed out in scoring a goal in round 9, he kicked 2 behinds. I've said, and I'll stand by the fact that Corey Durden is at present our answer to our small forward woes in terms of talking about a traditional attacking small forward. I don't think Jesse has that ability to take the next step. Unfortunately, I don't think he does. He may be that player that can provide, tackling and pressure nous and everything else. But if that's the case, why are we playing Frankie Evans? Why are we playing, when fit, of course, Fogarty? So I don't know the fascination of playing multiple players in this role. If we're not kicking goals, we're not winning games. It's pretty simple, isn't it? So, I do not understand why we're playing, and we're talking now to the structure side of things and setup. Why are we playing with as many small forwards as what we are? It is so perplexing. And people are saying, if we drop Jesse Motlop, who comes in? Well, not another small forward, because we don't need as many small forwards as we've got. We've got Will White, we've got Jesse Motlop, we've got Corey Durden, and we've got Frankie Evans. Now, the other player as well is that man, Frankie Evans. I'm sorry, but Frankie, you are not up to senior footy. And it's no surprise you've been delisted by 2 other teams, because one thing I will do is I won't fault his endeavour and his heart. And it's something that I tweeted out during the game. on our Twitter account because he tries his heart out, which is great to see. But so did Nick Graham across the journey as well. Did he last at senior footy? No, he didn't, unfortunately. So Frankie Evans, he's like the classic suburban footballer that, plays with a lot of heart, a lot of spirit, but just doesn't have the skill set required to, really belong at senior level, which is unfortunate because he seems like a pretty nice dude. But, on a footballing level, he's just not up to it. So even more so than Jesse, he's just not up to it, Frankie Evans. So really, we don't need Frankie Evans, and we could probably afford to give Jesse a bit of a run in the VFL because I'm not against that. Like you look at other teams, the way they've developed players, Western Bulldogs, they've got Bustlinger, their defender, key defender, in the VFL for 3 seasons now, high pick. They did the same thing with Jamara as well, as we know what's going on at the moment. That aside, he was in the VFL for an extended period where if he was playing with someone like, a Carlton team, he would be playing non-stop regardless of form. But you need guys in the VFL to work on the basics. They can do that because the pressure that is applied to try and work in your game and develop it at senior level with the pace of the game, the pressure, everything else, and the talent required, it's awfully hard to do that. So I think it's a positive. If we give Jesse a bit more time in the VFL to develop his attacking side of his game, a bit more time to develop the spatial awareness and not getting caught, his skill set as well, kicking under pressure, all that sort of stuff. Because the one thing I do like about Jesse is when he's actually played through the middle, he looks very, very exciting, but again, just lacks that bit of polish. And I think being demoted down to VFL level is only a good thing. And I think that's the way we should be approaching things is that, yes, you kind of use VFL as a bit of a threat or a punishment to some players. And that would probably be more so Gov because he's not performing. But when it comes to Jesse, he just needs time in the VFL. And if after a bit of time in the VFL, he gets his next opportunity and doesn't quite take it, well, then we know. We know that maybe the chance of him being the answer to our small forward woes isn't there. So those are the main culprits there. And, just to that, speaking to the game itself, Sauce unfortunately went off with what they're saying is a groin injury. So he'll most likely miss a week, 2, 3. We'll just have to wait and see when the injury report comes out tomorrow, as I'm recording this on Monday evening. And then, of course, we had poor Jordan Boyd coming in for his first game for the season, and he gets concussed. So we're going to be down at least a couple of players, and the question is who comes in. Now, Lemmy on the weekend in the VFL kicked 7 goals. Do we give him a crack off the back of Sauce, meaning that we're going to be down a key tall? Throw Lewis Young back, and after that, allow Lemmy maybe to go into the forward line and do some work. The Giants coming up, their defense, as we know, is rock solid. So, do we go with that extra tall, one less small in Jesse Motlop? However, having said that, I think Jesse Motlop will keep his spot because again, lack of depth, everything else, and I think Frankie Evans of I guess the quartet of the small forwards that we've got. Frankie Evans, we don't need him. He's not playing the role. So Will White, I think, you can probably excuse his quiet game. Again, first-year player. I played only a handful of games. I don't mind persisting with him. If Zachy Williams comes back in, Frankie Evans out. That's the thing. It's like, who else comes in? Because we've had a host of injuries and we don't have the depth. And it's just, speaking of the depth, it's so laughable seeing Bam Matt Kennedy just absolutely smashing it at the Dogs. And I knew it would happen. I knew it. I'm happy for him because he's a really nice bloke. But end of the day, what were we thinking? Now let's talk about positives. And the big positive, of course, was Cooper Lord. And I made a tweet pre-game. Lord is going to truly show he belongs at senior level tonight with a sub-free full game. And it's something that I've been saying for a long while. Give this bloke a crack. Saw even signs in the first round 1 game against Richmond when he came on. He's got incredible spatial awareness, incredible decision-making, really, really nice kicking. And I just haven't understood why he's been played as the sub. And finally, when given a full game, Voss and co finally see what he can offer the team. Just incredible. I don't understand how like supporters like us can see this from the stands when the coaches don't. So just crazy. Absolutely crazy. But it's a positive. It's a positive. And if he goes back to being a sub again, honestly. But outside of that, there wasn't really much to speak about. I mean, Charlie looked pretty good. He looked like he was on for the night. And then he made a couple of, easy errors. Decision making as well. Like there was a mark that he had almost in the pocket there. Not on the tightest of angles, but could have quite easily, kicked a set shot using a drop punt, but, lined up to do the usual, check side. And for some reason, I don't know what crossed his mind, but he opted to play on. And he kicked it behind, it rushed and missed it. So I don't know what the thought process there was, but craziness. Sammy Walsh, 19 disposals. Wasn't the sort of game that Walsh has been, showing some really good signs in recent times, but it just was not on par. Dirds was probably the best of our small forwards. Kicked a goal. Will White, non-existent. Weeders was Weeders. Sauce, unfortunately, a big loss. And I'm really worried about GWS with him missing. Pitnet, he, as I mentioned earlier, kind of held his own a little bit until Grundy got on top of him and absolutely wiped the floor with him. Jesse, just not good enough. Had a couple of nice tackles, but just not there. McGov, nope. Cooper Lord, incredible. Ollie Hollins did a couple of nice things. Forays forward. Lige, Hewitt, Haynes. Frankie Evans had a couple of shots on goal and missed those. Ches was everywhere. Matty Carroll, relatively quiet. And likewise, Jordan Boyd and Binzi there as well. So, with that, ladies and gents, let us know your thoughts. What do you think happens out of this? Heading into the Giants game, what changes are you hoping to see and what changes are you expecting to see? Personally, I'm hoping that Frankie Evans goes out of the team. And if we ever have to call upon him again, it's probably because we've had a heap of injuries and we're forced to actually select him. I'd love to see Harry Lemmy at senior level. Is this a game for it? I don't know. But I love rewarding a really nice performance, and that was definitely one of those. Gives us that extra tool that we're going to be missing with Sauce out. So I wouldn't mind that. Doherty, again, I think he had 39 disposals or something. He's probably one that needs to come back in based upon form. And hopefully he can translate that form from the VFL over to senior level, and he's got a bit of confidence back in his body and ability. But yeah, outside of that, I don't know. I don't know. We'll have to, digest things a little bit further and then analyse the Giants game, of course, which will be coming up next. Let us know, as I said, your thoughts down below. Always keen to hear your opinions. And with that, we'll catch you in the next one. Go Baggers.